The College Football X is on the air. John Wilkerson here. This week, a big one in the Big Ten. Indiana and Ohio State in the Horseshoe. Jon Nelson has the voice of the Indiana Hoosiers, Don Fischer. Plus, Appalachian State is a brand name in the Sun Belt. The Mountaineers head to the Teal Turf for a Saturday afternoon date with unbeaten Coastal Carolina. Adam Witten, the voice of App State, joins Jon Nelson as well. And it's Bedlam week in the Sooner State. Barry Tramel, columnist from the Oklahoman, educates the masses on the Oklahoma State rivalry and what Saturday's game means for both teams. Plus, later, it's the Stereo J-Dubs, so let the show begin.
Welcome to the College Football X with your hosts, Jon Nelson, John Wood, and John Wilkerson.
Thank you, Steve Henderson, and we've got a coaching change. South Carolina has pulled the trigger on Will Muschamp. He was let go over the weekend following the Carolina loss. And so now Mike Bobo takes over as the interim. And here to talk about it is Chris Mooneyham from 680 The Fan, one of many college football experts we pull, and things like this happen. And, you know, Chris, I don't think this was a shock, but I think it's happened because, A, that university up in the upstate is a national brand now, and now that Coastal Carolina is undefeated and 15th ranked right now, South Carolina is like third in the pecking order, and that just doesn't sit well with Gamecock fans.
I think that's a funny way of putting it, and I had not thought about that in this equation. John, good to be with you. Thanks for having me. And I think that absolutely that plays a large role in the conversation piece. Always Clemson will play into the conversation piece. I will tell you, though, I struggle for a way to articulate it. Maybe I'm just a skosh surprised, a tad surprised that the move was made. Look, they have struggled. There's no doubt about that. I looked up some numbers before I came on. South Carolina is 6-14 in their last 20 ball games. They've certainly struggled, and with Muschamp being a defensive guy, you would expect for them to play really well defensively. And a lot of your listeners, of course, out there are going to know that they've just been absolutely gouged defensively over the last really 4 out of the last 5 ball games, but especially the last 3 ball games. I think they've given up something like 160 points. I'm still a little surprised that the move was made, frankly, because I thought they may have felt as though this was going to be a down year at the start of the season. And, you know, Carolina, as somebody who also covers some high school football, I hear a great deal about South Carolina. And they were starting to really make some inroads in the state of Georgia, including one kid named Gunnar Stockton, who is committed to South Carolina, is a big fan of Muschamp. Gunnar Stockton is out of Rabun County High School in northeast Georgia, is a big Muschamp fan. And I just wonder what the firing of Muschamp will do to the potential of keeping some of these highly prized recruits from leaving, decommitting from the program. So in that regard, I'm a little surprised. But 6-20 and the way they play, 6-14 over the last 20, and the way they played defense, it's not that big of a surprise.
Yeah, we'll go over some the list of possible list of candidates here in a minute. But what does this mean for Will Muschamp? Because remember about 10 years ago, well, maybe before that, when he was defensive coordinator at Texas, he was the head coach in waiting when Mac Brown was supposed to step down. That didn't work out. He got the job at Florida, kind of a mediocre career at Florida, gets a second chance at South Carolina, started off well, but it's kind of flamed out. So what does this mean for Will Muschamp? Does he go back to being a defensive coordinator? And he was a really good one too.
Right. Yeah, I think that is the future for him. And let's also take one more step back. Don't forget, Johnny, that he was I know he was the co-SEC Coach of the Year. Was that 2012? I think he shared that with Kevin Sumlin in 2012. Mm-hmm. So he got off to a good start at Florida as well. But then it kind of petered out. Maybe it's fair to say that it flamed out. And I think that people gave him the benefit of the doubt. First head coaching position. He had a couple of chancy moments, a couple of squirrely type moments as a coach, decision making. and temperament on the field, if as I'm sure everyone remembers. And they said, well, we won't see this. He'll get another opportunity. He'll clean it up a little bit. He'll be better as a second head coach in a new program. And he was about the same, maybe even a little bit worse. And South Carolina, of course, is what it is. He's above 500 in his career. And, John, to answer your question directly, I think the next step is D.C. It might be in 2 years. It might be next year. But I would still expect that maybe an FCS or a Group of 5 team offers him a head coaching position in at least the next couple of years.
Or you may be sitting behind a desk analyzing football games. Who knows?
Well, that's a great point. Maybe next year he just takes a year off and circles the scene. And a lot of coaches have said after they've either left a job, knew that they still wanted to coach, or they've been fired, that a handful of coaches, I can tell you right off the top of my head, have said that the greatest decision they ever made was spending a year in television.
Well, they get to scout the entire nation and see what other coaches are doing, and they get their batteries recharged. Yeah, I totally get that. Chris Mooneyham from 680 The Fan is our guest, leading off the College Football X as we're talking about South Carolina parting ways with Will Muschamp. And, of course, the list has come out. Of course, Ray Tanner's list is the only one that matters, the athletic director at South Carolina. And I'm sure on his short list may be Jamie Cantwell at Coastal Carolina. He was asked about that in his presser on Monday. I love his answer, Chris. His answer was, right now my wife's van has a brake light out. I'm focused on trying to fix that without getting her upset. I've got bigger issues to worry about. Love that answer.
I like I think that's a possibility. I think that in doing so, you'd have to get past some issues, some conversational pieces. I would expect to hear Hugh Freeze's name. Quite obviously, we've already started to hear that. That's no big surprise. List. He's on everybody's list. Exactly right. I think another guy who's on a lot of lists is Billy Napier. No big surprise there. And then I would expect that Mike Bobo will get a fair shot from Ray Tanner to prove what he can do in the short time remaining in this season. And then I would expect that Bobo will get an interview, and Tanner will give him a chance to say, all right, look, if you became the head man, what direction would you take the program in? Mike Bobo is highly respected in SEC circles, of course. Ray Tanner has been around a long, long time in the SEC, as we all know, and will do his due diligence and will be thorough. I would expect for Bobo to get an interview. I think that the two names I just mentioned, and then there's probably 3 or 4 guys off the radar we're not quite thinking of right now. Who's the hottest DC right now, John? Or who's the hottest OC right now across the country? I would expect you'll have a long list of guys who will be willing to take over this program and have a chance to get in the SEC.
And I want to throw a few names out at you that are kind of outsiders that, are rather intriguing to me. One is Luke Fickell at Cincinnati. Look, that personnel group at South Carolina is very similar to what the personnel group he has at Cincinnati. Does Luke Fickell want to make that move?
Absolutely, I think he'd want to make that move, and I think that's a great name. And you read my mind. That's one name that I kind of had on a short list as well. Cincinnati's popping this year. Not sure what they're going to be next year. I think he might be of the mindset, not now, because coaches mean it when they say they're concentrating on this given season. But that doesn't mean that you also, part of your job as a coach is to look ahead and know what you got for the next season. And I think that this is the pop year for Cincinnati. So if it is, and they're going to take a bit of a step back next year, then maybe this is the thought process. Let's go for it this year, see how high we can reach, and then potentially he'll be thinking about trying to move on to a bigger program. And plus, with his offense and the way that he has proven himself, I think he gives you a good shot of keeping the Stockton kid I was telling you about a moment ago out of the state of Georgia.
And the other name that kind of intrigues me, and he was on Steve Spurrier's staff for a few years at South Carolina, and he's got the bloodlines to be a successful head coach, is Shane Beamer at Oklahoma. He's been one of the architects of that offense in Norman, and his time this may be the opportunity for Shane Beamer to follow in his dad's footsteps.
I don't mind that. I think that would it behoove Carolina, South Carolina? I got to stop calling them Carolina. North Carolina fans hate that. Would it behoove South Carolina the administration, Ray Tanner, to think about going after a more established head coach? Or have you gone down that road enough? Perhaps it's the opposite. Perhaps with some of the hires that he's made, including Muschamp, now the time is the time to bring in a hot coordinator, as I was mentioning a moment ago, and then Beamer's name that you just mentioned. So maybe that is a perfect fit. I would expect that he'll have a host of interviews.
Well, it's a mystery what's on Ray Tanner's short list. We just threw out a few names. Let the debate begin to see who is going to be the next leader for the South Carolina Gamecocks. Chris, tell the masses what you're doing.
Well, getting ready for Thanksgiving. That's the first thing. Yes, I am actually. Yeah. We're ramping up for the holiday season at the Fan 680 and 93.7 FM in Atlanta, where you can find us on the 680 The Fan mobile app, 680thefan.com as well. But ramping up for the end of the college football season. We're ramping up for bowl season as well, such as it is. And we'll be following the end of this football season as tightly as just about any radio station you'll find across the country. 680 The Fan, your high school football, your college football, and your NFL voice of the South.
And a frequent contributor to the College Football Act. Many thanks for joining us.
You got that right. Yes, sir. Thanks for having me.
When we come back, Jon Nelson's with Don Fischer, the voice of the Indiana Hoosiers. They've got a huge game coming up against Ohio State on Saturday. That's next, and you're listening to the College Football X.
The online sports guys would love to hear from you. Go to our Twitter page at OSG Sports for a comment, rant, or just whatever's on your mind about college football. Now, back to the College Football X.
Welcome back to the OSG on CFB. One of our X Factor interviews this week is a returning X Factor. We revisit Indiana University football. The voice of Indiana University, Don Fischer, joining us here on the X once again. Congrats on the successes so far this season. Thanks for returning.
Not a problem.
All right, so let's go back and let's just go back before we go forward. Now that there have been a couple of days to kind of look at what happened last time out, your 30,000-foot takeaway of the last time that IU was on the football field.
Well, Indiana obviously has played quite well at times this year. They've had some games in which they didn't play as well. Obviously, last Saturday was one of those, but they still won 24-0, which is unheard of at Indiana on a general basis. When you play somebody that's as talented as Michigan State is, or a Penn State or a Michigan, those types of teams, Indiana usually has struggled, but this year they've beaten them all. And it's been a high for Indiana fans, certainly, even though they can't see it. But it's certainly been, without question, a bit of a surprise just because of the strength of those other programs that they've had over the years. But this Indiana football team has looked special.
And obviously we can start looking at Michael Penix with what happened last week, 25 of 38 for 322 and 2. And just from a personal standpoint, how long did it take you to say Ty Freifogel without getting tongue-tied?
Well, I still get it tongue-tied every now and then, but I've gotten pretty used to the name without question. But he's been really special the last 2 weeks. He has just been phenomenal, 140-some yards a week ago, and then this past Saturday he comes up with a 200-yard performance. That's just special stuff. And Ty is one of those guys who's been around now for a long time at this program, has paid his dues, has worked his tail off, and he's just starting to, harvest the fruits of what he's sown, because there's no doubt he has become a terrific pass catcher, number one, a great route runner, number two, but three, a really competitive football player as well. And those 50-50 balls rarely go to the other team.
When you look at things defensively, obviously defenses take a lot of pride in shutouts on a weekly basis. I think that when you look at the defensive tackles and that front line for Indiana so far, it's really shown out the successes as a part of the season. What's been your take about looking at that defensive line so far?
Well, defense has been a problem for Indiana forever. And this is the first defense since the Bill Mallory era, which ended in 1996, that we've seen a defense play like this. And the defensive line probably doesn't get the heroics that some of the other players on the team get. from a defensive perspective, but this group has been really good at being solid. They have been terrific against the run so far this year. They have been able to put a little bit more pressure on quarterbacks than they have in the past, which is dramatic because that's a big change for this program. And probably the biggest thing about the defensive line is the number of players that they play. They probably have 10 different guys that they'll work into those 4 spots. And that's been interesting because it's not just the first year that they've done that. Ever since Tom Allen's been here, he's worked a lot of different defensive linemen into playing time. And to have that much depth where if you do get somebody hurt, you can just slot somebody else in there. That is very, very important.
For someone who doesn't watch Big Ten football on a weekly basis and isn't as ingrained in it as the schools that are a part of it, how would you describe Tom Allen as both a coach and a person to someone who doesn't watch IU football on a weekly basis?
Well, the first thing that you would talk about Tom Allen is how much enthusiasm he has, not just for football, but for life. He's a terrific person. He's a great guy to deal with from a broadcast perspective. As a broadcaster, you never hear him grouse about having to do an interview or sit there and go, do we have to continue this long? Do we have to go that long or anything like that? He's one of those guys that's understands his role in that regard and never takes anything for granted. But he is a tremendous person individually. I mean, his motto is LEO, love each other. And he not only teaches that, preaches that to his football team, but he lives it every single day. And, he can get excited and he can get in your face and be tough on players and things like that, but he doesn't take it to an extreme. And his personality has just involved all of the players on this football team in the sense of LEO, love each other, and they all believe it, and you can see how they play for him on the field. I mean, this team is playing for Tom Allen as much as they're playing for themselves.
Indiana right now, if memory serves, highest ranking in the AP poll since November of 1967. What's the current vibe around the IU fan base and the community as much as you can gauge it as things stand right now?
Well, that's the toughest thing to gauge right now because we don't have any fans at games. You don't have the interaction these days that we used to have, that we had a year ago. But I don't think there's any question. Every person that I run into is talking about Indiana football. They're not talking about Indiana basketball. They're talking about Indiana football. And that's saying something at Indiana University because it's always been known as a basketball school first. So there's a real excitement for this football team. The saddest part of this whole season has been the fact that of the 25,000 fans that buy season tickets every single year and have been doing it for 40 and 50 years, that type of thing, those people are not getting a chance to see this team in person, and that's just sad.
Don Fischer, the play-by-play voice of Indiana, hanging out with us here on the OSG on CFB, a returning X Factor interview for the show. I know that a lot of folks also, we talked about the defensive front. Let's talk about the secondary and how ball hawkish the defense has been there. Intercepted 10 passes so far, good for 7th in the country, plus 8 in turnover margin. Obviously, another signature that you've been able to see this season.
Well, and this, John, I'll tell you right now, this is the best defensive backfield that Indiana has ever had, at least in my 48 years of doing IU, and that's a long time. And that's saying something because we've had some really good defenses back in the day with the Mallory era, like I said earlier, and they were very aggressive. But this defense has been more aggressive, and the defensive backfield has been the bone of that defensive aggressiveness. And without question, quickness, toughness, physicality, all those things that have been lacking at Indiana for so many years are suddenly there. And Kane Womack, the defensive coordinator, the youngest Power 5 defensive coordinator in the country at age 33, has just done a remarkable job of taking this defense and putting them in positions not only from the player standpoint to be successful, but they blitz from every conceivable position on the football field. It's just been astounding to watch. And it's been fun to see these kids go out there and play like this because, again, we haven't had a defense like this in a long, long time.
And obviously, it's going to have one of its sternest tests all season, regardless of what we're just talking right now with Ohio State coming up this week or anywhere down the line. I think that going up against Justin Fields, the key, I think, is to keep contained and make sure he doesn't escape and get outside the pocket and beat you multiple ways. I know it's a little early as you and I are talking here where study hall is concerned toward Ohio State, but what's the early returns on going up against the number 3 team in the country?
Well, I think the biggest thing that this team will go into this game with is their confidence factor right now. I don't think that this ball club believes that there's anybody that they can go on the field with that will just knock them out, if you know what I mean. From that standpoint, I'm really confident that this team's going to play well. That said, they haven't met anybody like Ohio State yet. And as much as you want to say, well, Penn State's a great program and Michigan's a great program, Michigan State's always been a great program, those 3 programs have not looked like great programs this year and haven't played like that. And so Indiana really is going to be playing the best competition that they've faced all season long. And they're going to have to be in for a rude awakening at times because I think Ohio State is as good as anybody in the country talent-wise, and without question, they're ranked 3rd, and it's justified. They've dominated the 3 teams that they've played thus far, and Ohio State's already had a week to get prepared for them because they didn't play last week because of COVID, and Maryland had to cancel the game with Ohio State. So there's going to be an interesting scenario to see if Indiana goes into this ball game, takes a punch in the mouth and gets it back up right away and is able to compete at the level they've competed with thus far this season. That to me is going to be the big factor.
All right, time for the promo as we wrap things up here. For those that want to listen, not just to this upcoming weekend against Ohio State, but all season long to everything going on when it comes to IU athletics, how do they listen on Saturday? How do they listen going forward? How do they listen to you all year long?
Well, obviously, you can go to TuneIn Radio, and you can tune in any radio station in the state that carries Indiana football. So you can go there. You can go to, I guess, My Tuner is another one that you can go to, or you can just listen to an IU radio broadcast if you're in the state of Indiana. So I don't know how else you do that, other than Sirius XM, I think, does carry the home broadcasting. So you wouldn't get our broadcast on Saturday, but maybe you could find it someplace.
That's the beauty of the AM dial and the way things are these days. Jon Fischer, the longtime play-by-play voice of IU football and everything IU. Noon kick on Saturday, Indiana and Ohio State. Thanks for returning to the show and being a part of the OSG on CFB and being one of our X Factors this week.
You bet, John. Thanks for having me.
Show continues after this. Stick and stay. We'll be right back.
What makes college football special? It's the rivalries and trophy games. From Bedlam to the Old Brass Spittoon, you are listening to Rivalries and Trophy Games on the OSG Sports Podcasting Network.
The College Football X continues. John Wilkerson back with you, joined by Barry Tramel, columnist for the Oklahoman. It's Bedlam week in Oklahoma, and it's our featured rivalry game this week. 14th ranked Oklahoma State, that Oklahoma. Barry, how would you describe this rivalry to someone outside the Big 12 footprint?
Historically one-sided. For many years, nobody paid attention to it. And now, in the last, 20 years, it's become first conference relevant, now nationally relevant. But it really hasn't changed in how one-sided it is. The Sooners dominate. Mike Gundy's been the coach at Oklahoma State. This is year number 16, and he's beaten the Sooners twice. So that's pretty much in line with the historic run of this series. So it's become these 2 programs are the 2 best in the Big 12 going back over 10 or 12 years. Oklahoma State's made itself a name nationally, but they just can't beat the Sooners very often.
Yeah, it's a tough task for the Cowboys, but let's look toward the Sooners here because, after that win over Missouri State, they had a couple of losses, and now they seem to have put themselves back into a position to get into the Big 12 championship game. How has Oklahoma evolved to the point where they've put themselves back in that position?
Well, they're they've just gotten better across the board. The defense is getting better. The redshirt freshman quarterback is Spencer Rattler is playing better, not committing turnovers. The truth of the matter is they got a couple of players back from NCAA suspension, really good players that they were missing early in the year. And they just messed up. It's been a crazy year, and they opened the season with Kansas State and Iowa State in the Big 12. And, Iowa State's really good. Kansas State's pretty good. It's no big crime to lose to Iowa State, but OU had a 21-point lead on Kansas State and just let it slip away. So they've made one mistake on average a year for the last 5 or 6 years in terms of conference play, but they haven't made two, and this year they made two. They paid the price, got themselves out of national, college football playoff contention, but have worked themselves back into Big 12 contention. So if they win out, they're going to the Big 12 title game, and it looks like they've got the bulk of the schedule behind them, so they probably will win out if they win Bedlam.
Now turning our attention to the Cowboys, I know statistically OSU is 16th ranked nationally in total defense. What have been some reasons why that OSU defense has played so well?
Well, 3 years ago, Mike Gundy fired his defensive coordinator, Glenn Spencer, who had done a pretty good job. They were actually decent on defense, but Mike just wanted some new blood and brought in Jim Knowles, who was over on David Cutcliffe's staff at Duke. Had done a nice job at Duke, former head coach at Cornell in the Ivy League. We thought, that's sort of odd because old Glenn Spencer was doing a pretty good job. And came in, put in the new defense. It struggled that first year, 2018. But the last 2 years, they've really taken to it. And they've got a lot of good players. The secondary is very good. They tackle and they cover. They've got no superstar defensive linemen. But they got 7 or 8 that can play, so they rotate a lot, really get guys, keep them fresh, and it's just become a really good team defense. And the whole league has sort of reverted to normal football. This is a series, it's a conference and a Bedlam series known for crazy football. The last few years we've had Bedlam scores of 62-52, 48-47. 61-41, just crazy. And this year, Oklahoma State has an outstanding defense. OU's is better, and so I think we're going to have sort of a normal Bedlam by national standards. And good part of that is just because Oklahoma State plays good, solid defense.
Yeah, did the men's basketball teams put up that many points during that time?
There's been occasions where they have not. Been occasions where they have not. So yeah, it's nuts that last year the Sooners got after them pretty good. Or Baker Mayfield's senior year is 58-23, so the Cowboys didn't hold up their end of the bargain. But last year was a little normal. Jalen Hurts, I think it was 34-16, and this year Oklahoma State particularly is playing some really low-scoring games. They've won games 27-13. They won 23 or 20-18. So 16-7. So it's sort of a throwback situation. There's an old line from an OU president from years ago. He wasn't trying to. He didn't mean it, and he was not even trying to be funny. He was exasperated at the state legislature when they wouldn't fund the university the way he wanted them to. And he told him, he said, "I'm just trying to build a university that the football team can be proud of." and when it's sort of reversed at Oklahoma State, they're just trying to find an offense that the defense can be proud of, and that's not the way it's been. In Stillwater of these many years, but it's that way now.
As we keep the subject on Oklahoma State here, they just went through a brutal stretch of their schedule, and they got a win against Iowa State, and then the double overtime loss to Texas at home hurt. They rebounded against Kansas State, so they've had some, and they've had a bye week before coming into Oklahoma. So, with that said, is the bye week good timing for Oklahoma State going into Oklahoma? Because I know Oklahoma has a bye week as well, coming off a bye
week.
Yeah,
it was great timing for OSU because they were really beat up. Injuries really mounted. They played Kansas State with one hand tied behind their back. Chuba Hubbard, the great tailback, was all banged up. He played, but was limited in his carries. Tylan Wallace, the great wide receiver, who was runner-up in the 2018 Biletnikoff, he missed the game with an injury. He actually played the last play. They sent him out, and he recovered the onside kickoff by Kansas State at the end of the game. But he didn't play, and he's their best player. They're beat up on the offensive line. This comes at a great time for OSU to get some of those guys back. A couple of defensive players. Their best safety missed the game. Their best defender, really, Kobe Harvell-Peel, missed the game. Hopefully he's back Saturday. So, yeah, it was great timing for OSU.
So you're on record already saying that you're thinking this is going to be more of a normal Oklahoma State type of game rather than the basketball scores they've put up. And you know, this is a rivalry I used to go to when I lived in that area. So this one's kind of near and dear to my heart as well. Do you see that coming to fruition? A little more of a normal football type game, especially when you said that Oklahoma's defense is improving quite a bit, and OSU's defense as good as it is. Do you see more of a normal type football game? Maybe lacking some of the craziness?
Yes. The truth is the entire Big 12 is playing sort of more traditional football. The SEC's gone crazy with scoring and wild finals. The Big 12 sort of acquiesced and gone back to normal. I don't think you'll see the winner of this game in the 40s. You might not see him in the 30s. I don't see how Oklahoma State is going to get much past 24 points. This is not their offense has been sluggish all year. So I think OSU has to try to turn this into a very low-scoring game. Try to get Spencer Rattler to make a couple of mistakes, which he's capable of, but he also has some firepower. So I think OSU is behind the eight ball in this game just because their offense just has slipped, and the defense is going to have to keep them in it. But even if you play great defense, the Sooners could score 24 or 28 points, and that might be enough to win convincingly.
We're talking to Barry Tramel from he's a columnist for the Oklahoman. Barry, tell our audience where they can read your columns and the coverage that you guys will be providing for Bedlam Week.
Well, we're at Oklahoman.com, and we're all over the Bedlam, and it's become a national series. When I was a kid, when I was a young writer, Bedlam was sort of a state thing. Nobody really paid much attention to it, but it's become sort of an acknowledged rivalry. Credit Oklahoma State's rise with their program. Game Day's even going to be here, so this is their game for ESPN. So I think it's the 6th or 7th time in the last 20 years that Game Day is going to be here. So it's a rivalry that's sort of all grown up.
It has. My first one was 1976, and I watched Terry Miller run wild against OU, and then I worked in local television in Fayetteville, Arkansas, and I went to OU every year in the 6 years I worked in that market. So you're right. It was one of those underserved rivalries that really nobody knew about, but now I think the nation in the last few years is starting to recognize Bedlam is it's up there with one of the top in-state rivalries.
Yeah, and it's the games are always interesting and dramatic. If the Cowboys could win a few more, it would be even more dramatic, more interesting. But we're very rarely are we lacking for intrigue when Bedlam arrives.
It is. It's appointment television for me, and Barry, you'll be there covering it for the Oklahoman. We really appreciate you joining the podcast.
You bet. Glad to do it.
When we come back, Jon Nelson is joined by Adam Witten, the voice of the App State Mountaineers. as they get ready to take on undefeated Coastal Carolina on the teal turf. That's next, and you're listening to the College Football X.
You're listening to the College Football X on the OSG Sports Podcasting Network.
Welcome back to the OSG on CFB. It is the X, and one of our X factors this week comes to us from Appalachian State University, and he's an alum, and I want to get into this before we go, what it's like to call games for your alma mater. Adam Witten, the voice of Appalachian State. Thanks for hanging out with us here on the X.
Yeah, John, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, so expectations. Let's just go all the way back to the beginning of the year. What were the expectations there on campus for the football season and for the football team this year?
Well, it depends on if you're asking pre-pandemic or post-pandemic. But, you know, at the end of the day, the
Let's do that.
Yeah, at the end of the day, the expectations at App State never really change. I mean, the goal every year for this program is to win the conference and win a bowl game. Appalachian has a long-standing history of winning conference championships, of winning national championships at the 1AA level, and now of winning bowl games. And so that's always going to be the goal. That's always going to be the expectation. And this program, because even with coaching changes, having a third new head coach in 3 years, they continue to have that consistency. And it's amazing, John, when we talk to other programs and talk to other broadcasters around the league, every time a team gets ready to play Appalachian, they say, this is the model that we're trying to hit. This is what we're trying to achieve. Because schools can have a fleeting winning season every once in a while, but doing it year after year with that type of repetition and consistency is what kind of separates the good programs from the great programs. And Appalachian's been able to keep that up even with various challenges and various transitions happening over the years. That winning tradition has still remained.
So what's the secret? Because as the Florida State alum in this conversation, where we have had several coaches in just as much a period of time, the results have not been the same. So if you could crack open your crystal ball and the secrets that have made Appalachian a success where others have not, what do you think it's been?
You know, I'm not saying this to say that other programs don't have this, because I don't know other programs as intimately as I know Appalachian, but it's the culture. It's the culture that they create. And that's a word that gets tossed around a lot in sports, but it's truly what they have there. I didn't realize that until I got there as a student back in 2000, and I first became initiated with the football program. It's just different on the mountain. And if you're not a part of it and you don't understand it, it's really hard to explain. But when you're there, you understand it. You understand the family aspect of it. You understand the culture. You see the passion. It is a program that, although it's nestled into a small town in the mountains of North Carolina, it has a passionate fan base that you could put up against a lot of other blue blood college football programs. That's what exists there. And so it is truly a special place. People come to realize it. And the administration and the leadership, all the way up to the chancellor, have always been able to understand that you have to find a person that gets that and that is going to keep that culture and that family dynamic there to keep that rolling. And so that's really kind of what it is. But really it's a buzzword used so often, John, and it really applies here. It truly is if you can maintain that culture over transitions, you can keep that winning going.
Offense has been humming a lot this season, 45 against Ark State, 31 against Monroe, 38 against Texas State. Obviously, the game against Georgia State, the outlier where your defense carried you through, winning 17-13, heading into the game that we'll talk about in just a little bit. But when you see an offense that is as electric as the Mountaineers' offense has been this year, what are some of the takeaways for someone who hasn't had the chance to see football in the Fun Belt this year?
Yeah, so App State's offense is a lot of fun, and it's because there's so many great players and exciting players. There's tons of speed, there's experience, there's versatility. You've got a 3-year starter at quarterback who's a captain now. You've got an offensive line that has more combined starts than anybody outside of one program in all of FBS. And so, it's a little different this year. They're kind of getting back to their roots on offense in terms of being more of a run-first type of team, dominate you at the line of scrimmage, come at you with different looks in the run game, throw the ball off of that success from the running game. And so, even though Appalachian may not put up the high point totals that they may have in previous years, like last year when they were more of an up-tempo type of offense and trying to score more points, it doesn't mean that they're not as dominant. It just means that, yes, they're capable of, if they have to throw the ball around 40 or 50 times and win a game that way, they could. But it's not necessarily their MO because, as you mentioned, John, that defense is so elite and so consistent. The idea is that you want to keep them fresh, right? If they're on the field a lot, they're not going to be as good in the fourth quarter. And they needed that defense from start to finish to win their previous game against Georgia State, where they were trailing until late in the third quarter. They didn't take the lead for the first time until 5 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. And if that defense wasn't capable of hanging on and giving them those opportunities and shutting down the opposition from start to finish, that offense wouldn't have had the opportunity to come back in that game. And so that offense that's its strength, is to win on the ground, win at the line of scrimmage, and find explosive plays off of that. But it's what's going to allow their defense to remain at a high level from start to finish.
I know that as you and I are talking, it's a little early in study hall to kind of break down Coastal Carolina at number 15 completely and totally. But what have the early sessions in Coastal Carolina 101 been like getting ready for this big game this weekend?
Very impressive. They're a very impressive team, and there's a reason why they're undefeated and ranked 15th in the country and have been dominant in a lot of times this year. This offense, they've got a great coach in Jamie Chadwell, who has got a really good offensive mind. And so they throw a kind of a unique offense to you. It may not look all that different when you see it in formations and pre-snap, but they use a lot of different motions and movements to try to, keep your eyes off of where they're supposed to be and get big chunk plays off of that. They've got a redshirt freshman quarterback who just doesn't make mistakes. And that's really the thing there. Grayson McCall is very talented. Again, he's a first-year starter as a redshirt freshman, but he's playing like a fifth-year senior because he's thrown 16 touchdowns and 1 interception. He's completing about 70% of his passes. But the reason he's able to do that is because he's not put in a lot of tough situations. The stat that I got from the coaching staff the other night when we were doing our weekly radio show is they've been in 3rd and long, which is, like 3rd and 10 or more. The number of times they've been in that situation this season is single digits. And so when you're not having to put your quarterback and your offense in those situations, it's going to allow you to make sure that you're getting plays that you want to run, to have those options, to keep the defense off balance. If you put the defense in a good position in a 3rd and long, then you're going to make more of those mistakes. You're going to put teams in good positions to score on you. So their offense just does a good job of staying ahead of schedule, always getting positive yardage, not making mistakes, and putting their quarterback in positions where he can succeed. Defensively, very good up front. Teron Jackson is a menace. And anytime you've got a game-breaking type of player like that up front that can just wreak havoc on an offense, it makes it really tough to do what you want to do. And that's where they've had success, is up front they disrupt, and they can create negative plays. They can create turnovers off of that. And so, it's going to be a big challenge. This team has gotten so much better year after year, and it's going to make for a really fun and highly anticipated game this weekend.
Adam Witten, the play-by-play voice of the Mountaineers, hanging out with us for the preview of App State and Coastal Carolina this weekend. All right, couple more questions. Thanks for hanging out with us. For those who will be watching this game, their first exposure to both of these schools, from your perspective, give me a shiny object for your team that folks need to focus on, and give me a foot soldier that isn't a shiny object, someone kind of below the radar that would contribute to the success of the team if you're to win this game this weekend? Give me a shiny object. Give me a foot soldier.
That's a good question. The shiny object is going to be the quarterback, Zach Thomas, if he's healthy enough to play. That's one of the big storylines this week is what's going to happen at the quarterback position. Zach took a big hit in the fourth quarter against Georgia State, was taken off the field on a stretcher in an ambulance to the hospital, didn't play the remainder of the game. Backup quarterback Jacob Huseman finished the game, led the game-winning drive. And now we're kind of waiting to see Zach's day to day. We're not really sure. It's a very, they're being very cautious and smart about what they do here. Jacob Huseman, the last time App went to Coastal, started the game for an injured Zach Thomas, and App won that game in his only start of his career. So the shiny object is the quarterback position. Zach has to make a lot of different reads in the run game. It's an option-based offense. There's read option looks. There's run pass option looks. There's triple option looks. And so if Zach is starting or Jacob's starting, that's the shiny object, is the quarterback position to make that offense go with the right decisions. The X factor is on the defensive side. He's gotten some headlines this week, but maybe not a name that a lot of people know just yet. DeMarco Jackson on defense. He was the Pro Football Focus MVP defensively for how he played against Georgia State, Sun Belt Conference Player of the Week. The reason he's so good is because he can affect the game in so many different ways defensively. You can bring him on a blitz and he can disrupt the quarterback. You can get him in run protection to stop guys along the line of scrimmage, but then he's fast enough to be able to cover guys out of the slot. He can cover fast and agile slot receivers to where it allows you to do more with your defense. If you have linebackers on the inside that can cover slot receivers, it allows you to do so much more with your defense in terms of your versatility. So DeMarco is a key for this team defensively, and he's been involved in a lot of the turnovers this year. And so App's going to need some turnovers. Both teams are going to need to force some turnovers to have some momentum-changing plays here. And if someone's creating a turnover for the Mountaineers on defense, my money's on DeMarco Jackson. All right, now the fun stuff. What's it like to call games for your alma mater? It's a dream. It really is a dream because, it's kind of the old saying, like, if you love what you do, you won't feel like you're working a day in your life. We had this moment where, it was a tight game against Georgia State. And this is just an example of what it feels like for me to be in this position. We had this moment against Georgia State where App had just gotten the lead, 17-13. The defense is trying to make one more stand. They make a stop on third down, and all of a sudden there's a penalty marker down on a hit on the quarterback. And I'm thinking to and I'm just hanging my head. I'm hanging my head like I'm trying to be professional, but at the same time, the school that you know and love is in a pivotal moment of a big game, and the referee says personal foul, face mask. And I just it's not audible, but my broadcast partner mentioned it on the air because he got a kick out of it. So I'm hanging my head, and the referee says personal foul, face mask on the offense. And as soon as he said offense, I went, okay, my mood flips on it, or, you flip the switch on my mood, and all of a sudden, it's, you're feeling jubilant. And that's the emotional roller coaster that I go through during a game. It stresses me out during games like that, but at the same time, to be calling games where I have that much invested, and it allows me to kind of, you're expected to kind of be the voice of the program, and you're trying to capture what other people are thinking who love the program. And if I can capture that in a similar type of way, like, I feel like that makes me better at my job. But at the same time, on a personal level, it's one of the coolest honors you can have in this industry, is to call games, to be the voice of a program that you know and love because it's your school. It really is kind of a dream scenario. So I'm grateful every day to have the opportunity.
All right, time to cut the promo to wrap things up. For those that want to listen to not just this game, but everything going on with your alma mater sports-wise on a weekly/daily basis, how do they do it?
I appreciate that. Yeah. So the Appalachian Sports Network can be found on affiliated radio stations around North Carolina. If you're in the area in Boone and surrounding high country and beyond that, our flagship station, 97.3 FM, is 100,000 watts. You can hear it in all kinds of distances away from where we're playing around the state. If you're out of the area, you can find us on the TuneIn app or on appstatesports.com. You can follow us on Twitter at appstatesports, and that's the best way to figure out how you can listen to us each and every game, including this Saturday against Coastal Carolina, when we'll begin at 10 a.m., 2-hour pregame show before kick.
Adam Witten, the play-by-play voice of App State. Have a hell of a call for a hell of a game. Thanks for hanging out with us here on the OSG on CFB and being one of our X Factors this week. Thanks, as always, for being a part of the show on a college football basis. We'll be listening. We'll be watching. We'll catch up with you next time.
Appreciate it, John. Anytime.
We'll be back in 2 and 2. You know, you'd think you're tossing to a break and you get all these break ideas caught in your head. Let's just do the old Chuck Woolery. 2 and 2. We'll be back after this.
Like the voice you're hearing on this podcast? It could be on your production, too. Just go to goodpipesvo.com. That's goodpipesvo.com and reach out to Steve Henderson on the Contact Us page. Go to the website, click on the Contact Us page, and then see what Steve's Good Pipes can do for your upcoming project. One played major college football. The other just thought about playing. It's the Stereo J-Dubs with John Wood and John Wilkerson.
So the question this week on the Stereo J-Dubs. I'm John.
What up?
I'm John Wilkerson. He's John Wood.
Yes,
That's
I
why
am.
we call ourselves the Stereo J-Dubs.
J-Dubs.
So the question this week is, will Georgia Tech and Arizona State actually field a team the rest of the year?
I mean, I think that's the $1 million question. I think, let me get my magic 8-ball. Let me shake it really quickly and see, the results are unclear at this time. I'm just not sure if they can, J-Dub.
For the second week in a row, both have seen their games postponed or canceled. And so, wow, 2 weeks idle. It's going to be interesting to see how they come out of that, because I know Georgia Tech has Duke next on the docket. And I know they're kind of treating it as a training camp for the Yellow Jackets. And Arizona State has Utah next on the docket. So,
if you think about it, John, I don't think Jeff Collins is upset about missing Miami this weekend. I'm just saying.
Well, that game has been rescheduled for the 19th of December or the 12th. Wow. One of those dates. We'll check on that, but it has been rescheduled. If is in contention for the ACC championship game, I think was a stipulation.
And also Marshall had their game postponed against Charlotte. So that's another top 15 team that won't be playing this weekend. So I don't know. It's COVID. You have COVID. You have COVID. We all have COVID.
And you contact traced as well.
Exactly. Absolutely.
So there's three things you've got to pass before you're able to play a game. It's nuts, isn't it?
It's insane. But hey, it's the new normal, right? I mean, you look at now and all the things, like, for example, this is a minor thing. I was at a high school volleyball game today, and we were pumping up the volleyballs, and the referee said, "Here, use this bottle of water before you stick the needle in the volleyball." I'm like, "Why do you need water for?" And they're like, "Yeah, before you'd have to lick the needle, but we can't lick the needle now because of COVID. So there's a water bottle there, so you could wet the needle to go in the volleyball." So it's just COVID has changed so many things on the landscape of sports. It's just, what's next, J-Dub? I don't know.
I don't either, but we're going to talk some big picture items here, and something that came up in a conversation I had with a buddy of mine that I'd like to get your take on is the quarterback position and how it's evolved, really in the pro level as well, but especially on the college level, where our recruiters on the major college level, are they searching for those quarterbacks like a Kyle Trask, like a Mac Jones, that can sling it out there fairly accurately and throw these deep balls because the receivers have become so skilled at with catching the ball and so fast now that the 50-yard bomb is kind of commonplace now.
Well, if you think about it, a couple of years ago, post Michael Vick and Robert Griffin III, those dual threat quarterbacks, the Lamar Jacksons, that was the coveted quarterback position, the one that could not necessarily step back, but could run with the ball, that dual threat. And you look at a Jarrett Guarantano, who was rated as one of the higher dual threat quarterbacks coming out of high school when he was drafted at Tennessee, and you see what he's done. But you got to think about a true pocket passer, like Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson is a pocket passer. He's not a runner. He runs second. He was to throw first and run second. And I think the Kyle Trask, the Mac Joneses, they're not really a threat to run. They will scramble if need to. But they're the people that are going to be throwing for 400, 500, 600 yards per game. And I honestly think that it's going back to that position. I think it's going back to that pocket passer, someone that can elude a rush, step up the pocket, maybe deke and make a couple of people miss. Because you look at like a Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson, when he was a whole pack of Badgers, right, whether NC State or Wisconsin, was the elusive quarterback. But now he can sling the ball 60 yards down the field in the air and has one of the prettiest deep passes. So I honestly think that deep threat, when you have all these massive receivers like the Kyle Pittses of the world and could go up and just win that 50-50 ball, like you look at what DeAndre Hopkins did when he was in college, that's the kind of receiver that we're having now, these big, powerful, strong receivers. And a pocket passer makes those basketball plays on the edge, commonplace. So I think you're right about it. I think recruiters are looking for that guy who can stand in the pocket, maybe take a hit or two, and can chuck it downfield.
And I brought this up like 10 years ago, but it seemed like terms that were exclusive to basketball have become commonplace in football now. I almost call it fast break football, but there you go. There's a basketball term that has kind of reached the football. And the other thing is posting up. You see tight ends posting up 10 yards down the field and posting up a linebacker. You hear about tempo. And these were things that you always heard in men's college basketball. And those terms are now creeping into college football, at least for the past 10 years.
Well, look at what Jimmy Graham did. Jimmy Graham, when he came onto the scene, was that prototypical basketball player. And that's what all the commentators said. He played basketball. He's got that leap. And I think the players like a Kyle Pitts and even Thaddeus Moss when he was at LSU and those types of players, those 50-50 balls, even, those guys that are 6'5", 6'6", maybe 230, that could go up against a small DB or a big safety and can win those balls. And I think as a receiver or as a quarterback, I'd rather have somebody on the edge that has that leaping ability, right? Because you look at, what Terry McLaurin did when he was at Ohio State. Not the biggest receiver in the world, but he had hands of glue. And, you have those possession receivers like the Julian Edelmans or those guys that are the tiny ones but can catch the ball across the middle. But you want those streaky big guys on the outside that can go up and pull a Randy Moss one-handed grab, right? So I think that you combine those big receivers with a pocket passer, that's a deadly 1-2 combination.
Yeah, you talk about hands of glue. The best I ever saw with that was Steve Largent.
Oh, absolutely. I had his rookie card when I was a kid.
I watched him play in college at Tulsa. He was all that back then. So let's move on with the Stereo J-Dubs, and let's talk about a few games on the docket that have interest that actually are going to be played this week that intrigue J-Dub and I, the two J-Dubs. And I think
you can say that again.
Yeah, and I think the first one I'm thinking of right now off the bat is NC State hosting Liberty. Liberty has a chance to go 2-0 in the ACC. They already have a win over Virginia Tech in a bonkers type of game. And now they go to Carter Finley against a pretty good NC State team. And should Liberty win this, obviously, Hugh Freeze is auditioning for the South Carolina job. But should Liberty win this, you got to think they're going to shoot up the AP poll.
And I think that this game is, I hate to say it, but it's a must-win for Liberty. Granted, do you say a team that's 8-0 has a must-win? I think you look at NC State, who's quietly had a decent season. They've had the injury bug has popped up on them, and they've had kind of an inconsistent season depending on what team actually shows up in Carter Finley. I think they're 5-3 on the year now. I think this is a home game for them. It's going to be it's supposed to be 70 degrees. It's supposed to be a great day. but I think that Hugh Freeze is going to have this team fired up because I think that Malik Willis is going to come out and have a fantastic game in the air and on the ground. You look at, he's the leading passer on the team. He's the leading rusher on the team. Where is he from, John?
He's from Roswell, Georgia.
Roswell, Georgia. And, DJ Stubbs is coming on quietly this year in the receiving end. I think that Liberty is going to absolutely hand the Wolfpack all they can muster this year. And I will put it to you right now, if Liberty comes out of this game winning, Dave Doran's seat is officially in fuego. It is on fire. Not to make a Flames reference, but his seat is on fire if Liberty comes out of Carter Finley with a win.
Need to make a correction with Liberty. They would be going 3-0 in the ACC because they did beat Syracuse earlier in the year at the Carrier Dome.
We forget about the orange. Yeah, no one cares about the orange.
Exactly. So, hey, they might qualify for the ACC title game.
They might actually. And this has got to be a must-win because you got to think Coastal on the other side. Coastal's going to win their next two games, and Liberty's going to want to go into that game on December 5th against Coastal with the same record. And it's going to be, it's going to make that game a lot more interesting in the Fun Belt, at least for Coastal anyway, because Liberty being the independent.
That is a game J-Dub and I are looking forward to. Should the two go undefeated, we have front row seats in front of our TV for that game between Coastal and Liberty. By the way, this is the first night game for Liberty as well. So if you're a betting man, that might be of some significance to you.
But I will tell you this much. The deal, if you say Hugh Freeze is in for the South Carolina job, that's going to have to be the best job ever because who wants to go into Columbia following Muschamp? I'm just saying, he's got it made in Lynchburg right now, and that's going to have to be the best deal in the world to lure him away from the Flames.
Well, while we're on the subject of South Carolina, of course, Will Muschamp let go. We talked about that earlier in the broadcast, and already the list of names have come out, and it's the same list that I'm sure is going to be for every open job. Steve Sarkisian's there, Jamie Caldwell's there from Coastal Carolina, which would be kind of interesting, well, obviously Hugh Freeze and Billy Napier. One of those would be interested, you think?
I don't think Jamie Caldwell leaves Coastal after 1 year because if he leaves now, it'll be a bad move for South Carolina only because he's got 1 year of success under his belt at Coastal. And, he's a hot commodity, but not necessarily a proven commodity. I think Billy Napier should be considered and should be interested in that job. I think Hugh Freeze will entertain it. I don't think you'll be interested. If Liberty goes undefeated, beats Coastal on December 5th and does well heading up into the top might he would be crazy to leave a team like that. But, who knows? There's a lot of money in SEC Power 5 football. It might be put your money where your mouth is. But, I think of those, I think Billy Napier would be probably the leading contender in my book. And I don't think so.
Thrown around, Joe.
Yeah,
Joe Brady, the Carolina Panthers offensive coordinator, Will Healy, the Charlotte coach, Steve Sarkisian, I mentioned him, Brent Venables. I don't think he'll leave Clemson for South Carolina.
He won't go across the street for that. No.
And one name I saw pop up was Shane Beamer at Oklahoma, who maybe he was on Steve Spurrier's staff at South Carolina, and maybe this is the move that Shane's looking for as far as following his dad's footsteps in the head coaching circles. He's been the right hand man for Oklahoma for their head coach. So
that's an interesting name choice. I think with the history of South Carolina, I think that's an interesting move. I doubt he'll leave that program to come to South Carolina. South Carolina is in shambles right now. They haven't recruited very well. But you see in Georgia what recruiting really does for you. How many 5 stars does it take to lose a national championship? So, it all depends on the package deal. And I think Columbia's hurting for a marquee coaching name. And I think, we'll see what the Gamecocks can throw at somebody. But there are a lot of interesting names on this. I don't think Steve Sarkisian makes the move. I don't think he's ready to come back to a head coach yet.
course, Jamie Caldwell is around in a way is a reason why this move was made, because South Carolina is kind of third in the pecking order in college football in the state behind Clemson and Coastal Carolina. It doesn't sit well with Gamecock fans.
Yeah, you don't want to be third to a Fun Belt team. So, they're used to sitting back seat to Clemson, but yeah, when Coastal made the move, they're like, "Nah, we can't deal with this anymore." And we said before several weeks ago, do people get a COVID pass for this year? Apparently not, because South Carolina is the first big name to drop, in this era of COVID. I thought he'd get a pass, but nope. Apparently that's not it.
Okay, so elsewhere in college football, we'll stick with the ACC. Who knew that Clemson and Florida State would be a noon kickoff on ABC? This should be prime time. Boy, has this rivalry fallen.
I mean, it should be prime time, but the way Florida State's been playing, I mean, Mike Norvell just has not gotten this team firing on all of his cylinders yet. So this game is going to really be a blowout, and that's why they probably stuck it at noon when, it's not a prime time ball game anymore. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, it would have been an awesome game with
5 years ago.
With Bowden and with both the Bowdens, right? It would have been a great matchup, but, even 5 years ago, yeah, but now this is a 25, 30-point win for DJU. Do we know, is Trevor back yet?
I think he is back for the Tigers.
Then make that a 30-point win.
So you're calling it there.
Yeah, I'm calling it there. I mean,
Trevor Nelson's going to love you. Trevor Lawrence is going to play.
Trevor's going to be like, DJU's good, but this is my team. It's going to be a statement comeback game for Trevor Lawrence. You watch.
In the Big 12, the marquee game is Bedlam.
Yep, absolutely.
We talked to Barry Tramel earlier in the show. This is really a huge game for Oklahoma State. As Barry Tramel said, this is it's becoming one of the top rivalries in college football that is so one-sided. Oklahoma has a huge advantage in this rivalry. Oklahoma State hasn't won this game in 5 years, and ironically, the last time they won a game in the series was in Norman. But Oklahoma State has a chance to go somewhere they haven't gone in years, and that's to a championship game. But they got to beat the Sooners to do it.
Yeah, and the thing about it is, it's going to come down to quarterback play, and I think whether Rattler or Sanders has the better game, and because you look at Oklahoma's running back is T.J. Pledger, right? I mean, he's serviceable. Going against a Chuba Hubbard, I mean, on paper that's a no contest. So I think Spencer Rattler is really coming to his own. I think he's having a really solid year for the Sooners. And I think Spencer Sanders, for Oklahoma State, is going to have to keep feeding the ball to Hubbard. I think it's going to come down to which team makes the fewest mistakes. I mean, because both of them are ranked. Oklahoma State's 5-1, Oklahoma's 5-2, and the line is Oklahoma by 7, believe it or not, and over/under is almost 60 points. So I still say Oklahoma State's going to come out by at least a field goal. I think Chuba Hubbard's going to be too much on the ground for the Sooners.
Whenever they meet, they put up basketball scores. I kind of like the Sooners in this game because the defense is improving, and both teams came off byes.
Yep.
So I tend to like Oklahoma, and I tend to think this is going to be more of a normal. What's crazy about this? Well, it's a crazy year. What am I saying? Yep. Crazy is normal. But the Big 12 scoring is down compared to the SEC and the ACC and the Big 10, which is kind of crazy when you think of that conference being defense optional half the time. Iowa State and Kansas State's a huge game, too, because Iowa State hasn't won a conference championship, I think, since Teddy Roosevelt was president.
And they won't win one this year.
But if they want to stay in contention, because right now they have a half-game lead over Oklahoma State in the playoffs, in the Big 12. If they want to keep that hope alive, they need to get by the Wildcats.
Well, K-State's hurting. They started off, they lost the first game of their season, and they rattled off 4 in a row, and then they've lost 2 in a row to West Virginia and to Oak State. So K-State's looking for a win. But I tell you right now, if Oklahoma upends Oklahoma State, I mean, that's giving good credence to the Cyclones. I think it's a possibility for that championship, but it's going to have to come down to, Oklahoma's got to beat Oklahoma State.
Yeah, and that would have a collision course of Oklahoma and Iowa State playing at Jerry World.
Yeah, that would be a game to watch.
That would be, yeah. Brock Purdy and that team and that grinding out defense that the Cyclones have.
Yeah, that's that matchup of old. That would be one of those slobber knockers that between the tackles and you have the air attack. So it's going to be a combination of both. Be a fantastic game to watch.
Here's a fantastic game to watch. Indiana at Ohio State.
Indiana.
We had Don Fischer, the voice of the Hoosiers, on earlier talking about that game. Look, Indiana, this is where I think Ohio State needs to be scared. Now, obviously, they're the superior talented team. But Indiana's coming, I hope they come in here with nothing to lose and just let it hang out. I mean, they're playing with house money in this game. Ohio State's the one that's going to have the pressure because, they're in the top four. So they position themselves for the playoff, even in this sprint season in the Big Ten. But they're going to have all the pressure in the world and all eyes on them. So Indiana can play free and loose.
Well, here's where I think it's going to be the problem, right? Indiana's coming off a 24-0 blanking of the Spartans, Michigan State. Ohio State's coming off a postponed week. So they've essentially coming off a bye week and had 2 weeks of film study against the Hoosiers, right?
Right.
So you look at you put a team like Ohio State and Justin Fields, give him an extra week of film on Michael Penix Jr. and Stevie Scott, right? And learning how their offense does and have their defense look at that. I think
Freifogel.
The name of the year. I think Oklahoma State. I think Ohio State right now the line is 20.5 points. The over under is 67. I think Indiana comes in. I think Indiana scores first. I think Indiana goes up 10 points. But I say Ohio State wins big late by at least 3 touchdowns. I think this team, you give them an extra week to prepare. You just can't. I mean, Ohio State, the Buckeyes are just going to be too strong for Indiana to handle coming off a bye week, I think.
I think Indiana makes it interesting, keeps it close. I just think Ohio State's superiorly talented that they will pull away in the fourth quarter. But there's going to be some nervous moments for the Buckeyes, probably early in the second half.
And this is a game that Justin Fields has to win to stay in Heisman contention. If he has a bad game here, if the Buckeyes drop to Indiana, you might as well kiss his Heisman hopes goodbye, I think, because Trevor Lawrence and Mac Jones and all these other people who are up there for the Heisman might pull away if the Buckeyes lose here. This is a must-win for Justin Fields.
If that's the top game in the Big Ten, then 1A is Wisconsin and Northwestern. Northwestern is a team, and they're playing this in Evanston, that will just grind you out. They are the image of their head coach, Pat Fitzgerald.
Absolutely.
They are solid, tough, fundamentally sound. They don't do anything to wow you. All they do is just bloody your nose and get in the end zone. Wisconsin, same Wisconsin team we've seen for years. Big linemen, great running backs, serviceable quarterback. I think this is going to be a 14-12 type of game. And I'm going to give the nod to Northwestern because Wisconsin's had their issues with COVID and practice time. And Northwestern just right now looks like they are, I'd hesitate to call them the team of destiny, but they kind of got that feel to them.
Well, you look at, Wisconsin. Wisconsin's got 6 running backs right now with double-digit carries on the year. Yep. So I think they're still trying to find their identity, right? Graham Mertz is not, the Big Ten wow you quarterback for Wisconsin. I think Northwestern comes out of here. I think they hit them in the mouth. I think it's a home game for them. I honestly think that, Peyton Ramsey's going to have a really good game in the air for the Wildcats. And I think Northwestern's going to win, and they're going to win big. But big, when I say big, I mean maybe like 17-13. I think they're going to come in late. Wisconsin's going to make it interesting just because that's what their defense does. And their defense spreads the field around. But I think Peyton Ramsey's going to have the better game at Northwestern by at least 4.
Moving on to the Pac-12, UCLA at Oregon. Chip Kelly returns to Oregon. And, and the reason why I kind of like this game, UCLA is coming off a win last week. So I'm not so sure if they've righted the ship there, but they're going to make it interesting going into Oddston to take on an Oregon team that has to put up 70 points at least if they're going to get any kind of consideration into the college football playoff.
Yeah, and for UCLA, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, the quarterback there, is having a serviceable year. I mean, he's completing over 50% of his passes, right? And Demetric Felton on the ground. So the Bruins have a decent running game, a decent quarterback back there. But I think Oregon is just a better stacked team. I think Tyler Shuff's going to have a better game for Oregon, and I think this is going to not even be a game. I mean, Oregon right now, the line is 17.5 and the over/under 67. So I think there's going to be a lot of points scored here, but UCLA falters late and Oregon by at least 10 points down the stretch. I think Oregon's going to come out at halftime and win the third quarter and just really take it away from there.
Just interesting to see Chip Kelly back in Eugene.
That's the drama right there, because I'd forgotten Chip Kelly was even at UCLA. It tells you how he basically left the Philadelphia Eagles and just went back into mediocrity. So I'm like, wow, he is still at UCLA. So I don't think he has a team this year that's going to change that mediocre relationship for the Bruins. They might prove me wrong. I mean, they're 1-1. They are coming off a win, so we'll see how that happens. But I think Oregon's just too strong in this one.
Thing about the SEC this week is there's just not any games that really wow you that you really want to invest your time in. Ole Miss and Texas A&M aren't playing this week. Florida Vanderbilt, we know how that is going to come out. Kentucky Alabama, I think we know what the outcome of that one. Bobo will lead South Carolina against Missouri. Sorry, J-Dub.
I'm just saying, I actually think LSU Arkansas will be the game of the week I'm watching.
I was getting that. I was getting there.
I think Auburn's going to beat Tennessee by 3 touchdowns minimum. Georgia's going to beat the crap out of Mississippi State. Florida's going to beat Vanderbilt. Alabama's going to beat Kentucky. So the only game with some question marks in my mind is LSU Arkansas. I mean, what is Coach O going to do against Coach Pittman? And I think that's going to be a chess match going down the stretch. LSU is only a 2-point favorite right now. So, and the over/under 64. So I think, Felipe Franks has a good day. I think if the Sooners defense can get a couple of stops here, I think the Razorbacks could come out of this game. It's a home game. They're playing in Fayetteville, John. So I think that this is a prime opportunity for the Razorbacks to knock off the Tigers.
It's an 11 a.m. kickoff in Fayetteville, too, on the SEC network. Why can't CBS pick this game up since they lost Ole Miss and Texas A&M? The second week in a row, CBS lost an SEC telecast.
They must be thinking they're cursed, but yeah.
But listen, Arkansas wants to get the boot back. They haven't had the boot in a while. And Felipe Franks, he's playing really well. He's really kind of solidified a position that's really been a trouble spot for Arkansas the last few years. And they have some nice offensive weapons, which brings me up for another sidebar, big picture item.
Right.
That drives me crazy about Arkansas's offense, what Kendall Briles is doing. Why do you stay in the shotgun inside the 5-yard line when you're at the goal line?
As an offensive lineman, that drove me crazy. You're on the 2-yard line. Get under center. When I was center, I'd be like, why are you 7 yards behind me? That means I have to block longer. That means I have to sustain blocks. We have to holes, because defenses now are so fast and so big and so strong. You have to get on the ball. And I've never understood why you get 7 yards deep for a 2-yard gain. That just makes no sense to me. And you're never going to get me to. That's just not, maybe for a play action, maybe a bootleg or a rollout, but if you're running the ball, I don't care how fast you are. I don't care if you've got Adrian Peterson back there or of old when he was at Oklahoma. It's not going to be smart. And so I've never understood that. Get under center, because you can still pull out, bootleg, roll out, play action from under center, but follow your hogs, follow the people in front, because that means I have to block for a shorter amount of time and get the advantage. I have the surprise because I know where it's going. Well, you're 7 years behind me. I don't know where you're going to go. We're going left, right. So it makes no sense to me. And here's another thing that doesn't make any sense to me, John. Yeah. Why does Trelon Smith have more yards on the ground than Rakeem Boyd? Rakeem Boyd should be having a fantastic season this year, and he's about 150 yards behind Trelon Smith. Is Trelon Smith that much better than Boyd?
No, Boyd's had injury issues.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he hasn't been 100% this year. But he needs a strong second half. I think you're right. He needs a strong second half, and that'll get Arkansas to that. 5 wins is kind of the magic level for Arkansas. If they can get 5 wins, that would be fantastic and a great boost going into 2021, especially for the recruiting classes coming in.
If Pittman gets 5 wins, Coach of the Year. I don't care what Alabama does. If Pittman can get 5 wins in Arkansas in a short season like this, he gets my vote for Coach of the Year.
One final game.
No offense to your Razorbacks. I'm just saying.
No taken. One final game to talk about in the Sun Belt. Coastal Carolina putting their undefeated record on the line against App State. Of course, App State's been the class of the Sun Belt. They are a brand name, and they're marching into the teal turf with a chance to pull off the upset Saturday afternoon. A national broadcast. It's great to see Coastal getting the national attention. It's great to see the Sun Belt getting this respect. But how do you see this game playing out?
The Mountaineers are going to come into Brooks Stadium and they're going to leave with a loss. I think, the App State is 4-0 in the Sun Belt. Coastal's 5-0. App's only got 1 loss on the season, and that was to Marshall, 17-7 in the second game of the year. I think the Mountaineers make this interesting, but one of my favorite stories, one of my favorite players of the entire season is Grayson McCall. I think Grayson McCall has, day in and day out, come in and made just great decisions. The 1,400 yards and 16 touchdowns for the Chanticleers. I think this is going to be great to watch. I think what's going to be the difference maker, though, is that can the Chanticleers control Datrick Harrington on the ground? If Harrington has a great game between the tackles, that's going to make it difficult because Coastal hasn't played from behind a lot this year. So if App State can get up 10, 14 points, we'll see, because Coastal's only a 5-point favorite right now. But I disagree with the over-under. The over-under right now is 48. I think more points will be scored in this game than you think. I think this is going to be an offensive showdown in which the Chanticleers are going to be. They're going to come out of this victorious. It might be in a cloud of dust, but I think Coastal is going to end this game with a win. And if they lose this game, that makes the game against Liberty even more important for Coastal and for Jamie Caldwell, because you need to go in. You can't lessen that game. That game is still the Super Bowl for both of those teams.
Yeah, I think it's huge that Coastal has this game at home. I also think, having watched Coastal a few times, the moment's not going to get to them. They're going to be prepared. They're going to be ready, knowing that they're playing. Let's face it, J-Dub, App State is the brand name in the Sun Belt. They've beaten They've got Michigan on their win list. They've captured the nation with some of their wins in the past, and they're just a unique football program. And this is a big game for Coastal, and I think they come through. And I think they come through by a field goal. I think it's going to be a very close game, and it's going to set up for a colossal matchup against Liberty toward the end of the season. But do the goalposts come down?
I think they do. I think they do for this one. I think that because App State, like you said, is the king. It's the crown. It's the cream of the crop the Fun Belt's always had. And the Coastals have always been the underdog. The Coastals, the Troys, those teams that are aggressive and play well but never get the top. I think if Coastal wins this, the goalposts come down at Brooks Stadium. I'm calling it right now. And I will say this, like I told you about Ohio State earlier, coming off a bye week. Coastal Carolina's game against Troy was postponed last week. So Coastal's had 2 weeks to look at App State film. So I'm telling you, for someone who was in a film study and who woke up at 6 a.m. to do a run, and then we watched film before our first class, if you give a good team, a good defensive and offensive coordinator 2 weeks to prepare for you, that's a problem.
It is. Some of the best coaches, you give them 2 weeks, and they'll bring a W to you. J-Dub, anything else on your mind?
I think I'm just really looking forward to some really good games this week that aren't, I guess, uninitiated top tier games like the Coastal App State game. Most people outside of North Carolina, South Carolina don't care about Coastal App State. For me, this is a huge game, being a North Carolina boy, and you spent a lot of time in North Carolina and South Carolina as well. Even for the non-football fan, this is a big game for me. So I'm really looking forward to that game. And I'm just also looking forward, in the back of my mind, the Louisiana Central Arkansas game. Louisiana's back in the top 25. Central Arkansas's had a good season. They're 5-4. We'll see what happens, but I think that game's being played in Lafayette at Cajun Field. So we'll see what happens. I think that'll be a good game for the Raging Cajuns to get back on the winning side. But, yeah, as far as I'm concerned, Liberty, NC State, and Appalachian Coastal Carolina are my 2 games of the weekend. Yeah,
Louisiana is going to take care of UCA. That shouldn't be a problem. So we're glad you enjoyed the college football acts this week. Check out our Twitter page at OSG Sports. Drop us a line. Give us a rant, a rave. Critique whatever the Stereo J-Dubs do. We don't care. We just want you to look at our Twitter page, give us a comment, and maybe we'll read it on the air, right, J-Dub?
Just don't bring up that coach whose name I will not talk about is coaching Ole Miss right now. Don't bring him up. Don't talk about him. He will not be in my repertoire. I promise you that.
And Mike Norvell for brother Nelson, but that's another issue for another podcast.
We won't talk about the quitter either. So,
also check out our website at theonlinesportsguys.com and read the musings of Phil Cantor. Of course, we have a Facebook page at OSG Sports and the app. The OSG app for your phone or Android or Apple device. It's free, and it's got some of our best podcasts on there. So that's going to do it this week. We thank Don Fischer, the voice of the Indiana Hoosiers, for joining the show, as well as Adam Witten, the voice of the App State Mountaineers, and Barry Tramel from the Oklahoman, the columnist for the Oklahoman, and enlightening us on the Bedlam series. And so that's going to do it for J-Dub, for this J-Dub, and for Jon Nelson. I'm John Wilkerson. Enjoy the games this weekend.
Thanks for listening to the College Football X. You can find this and past shows by downloading the OSG Sports app on your mobile device. And enjoy all of our shows from the OSG Sports Podcasting Network. The OSG Sports app is up and running. Download it today.